Today I'd like to talk to you about a trip through to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. I was in Kenya, in Nairobi, with my partner at the time, and we were planning a couple of months holiday around Africa, through Uganda, into Zaire to go up and see the gorillas in the Rwenzori Mountains, but also we wanted to catch up with some of the national parks, and Mount Kilimanjaro was high on the list. So we took a van from Kenya down to Arusha. Interesting incident happened on the van. As we were traveling along the highway, there were some people farming in one of the fields, and a young girl came running across the field to wave to the van as we went past, or at least that's what we thought. But when she got to the road, she never stopped, and she ran straight into the van. We ran her over, effectively. Well, I didn't run her over, but the driver did. She wasn't badly hurt, but she was pretty badly bruised, so we had to put her in the van and take her to the local hospital before we could continue the trip. We got down to Arusha, spent the night there, and the next day caught the bus for about a 3-hour trip into Morango, a little village at the base of Kilimanjaro, where we were going to start our climb. We hadn't booked anything. We didn't know how to go about climbing Kilimanjaro, but we figured if you get there, things tend to sort themselves out. On the bus there, we met this young boy, probably 13, 14, 15 years old. He asked us, "Are you going to climb Kilimanjaro?" We said, "Yes." He said, "My brother's a guide." He said, "Do you need a guide?" We said, "Yes." He said, "Would you like to meet him?" So we said, "Yes." So when we got to Morango, he took us round to his place. Went and brought his brother back. His brother was not actually the guide. His brother was the head of the house there. This guy was a giant. He must have been like a double car garage across the shoulders, about 8 foot between the eyes, and when he took his shirt off, his abs looked like the rolling hills of the Alps or something like that. It was just enormous, this guy. If you were casting anybody for a role in Mandingo, this is the guy you would actually put as a star. So he went and got a friend of his who was actually going to act as the guide for us. We didn't have any equipment whatsoever because we weren't really planning to spend much time at heights, and we thought Nairobi and Kenya was actually quite warm. Actually, it's quite high, Nairobi, and it does get very cold at night. So they rigged us out in some old garb, old skiing garb, old boots. My boots didn't even match each other. An old jacket each, which we had, and we spent the night at his place. That evening, while we were waiting to set out the next morning, we went for a walk through the village, and as you tend to do, we ran across this little bar. We wandered into this bar. There was this group of people there drinking chook. I'm not actually sure that that's how you pronounce it, but spelled T-C-H-O-U-K. It's a sort of a millet drink, or an alcoholic drink made out of millet, although it looked as though it had been made out of flies and mosquitoes and other dead bodies, and that were, judging from what was floating in it. Anyway, they dared us to try it, which we did. I've tried home brew in many countries in the world. Kava in Fiji, in Bolivia we've drunk it, in many small countries, but this have got to be the worst drink I have ever had anywhere. Words escape me when I even try and describe it. But it was fun. We had a good night. Nobody spoke much English. This was in the early 90s. People told me that climbing Mount Kilimanjaro is very, very different now. But back then it was pretty simple and pretty basic. Next morning, the guide arrived with a porter to carry our food and everything, because you've got to carry it all up there. Normally, when you do the Morango trek, it's a seven-day trek, 6 nights, 7 days. But a young chap who was working for me at the time was flying over to meet us in Nairobi to take the trip through Uganda and to see the gorillas in the Rwenzori Mountains. So we had to get back to Nairobi quite quickly. So we decided to cut it down to 4 days instead of 7. 2 days up, 2 days back. We set out in the morning, early in the morning, with a porter, and he just put us on the track and said, "You go ahead. It's pretty easy walk, and I'll catch up with you later." The idea was that we would miss the first normal stop for the night and go straight on to the second hut, which we did, Horombo Camp. We got there about 4 o'clock in the afternoon after a very exhausting day's climb, and we were dressed in nothing but a t-shirt. And I'm not actually quite sure how high Horombo Hut is, but it was getting dark and it was getting cold, very cold. So cold we were shivering because our porter was so far behind that one of the other tourists lent us a single sleeping bag. And Fiona and I both climbed into the single sleeping bag just to keep warm. And we lay down until our porter arrived. When he arrived, everything was fine. He pitched a tent for us and cooked us dinner, made a fire, cooked us dinner, etc. We slept the night. We got up the next morning, had breakfast, and we were all ready to go when we got word from the guards, the camp guides. Said, "Your guide has been in touch with us. He has altitude sickness. He can't join you. You have to go back down." Well, that wasn't an option in my mind. I said, "No, we're not going back down." We could see other people, other groups setting off along the track. So I said, "There's the track. It's pretty obvious where to go. We can just follow one of the other groups and we'll get there. The porter knows where to go. He'll follow us." So the camp security said, no, you can't do that. But I insisted. And eventually what they did was that they put us with another group. There was another group of about 4 there. So they put us with them, and the guide agreed to accept us. And so there were 6 of us set out. 6 of us set out to Kibo Hut. Funnily enough, the next day's walk was actually more difficult than the first day's walk, travelling, missing one hut and travelling 2 days walking one. Primarily, I think, because of the altitude, because the climb itself wasn't very difficult. It was mostly reasonably flat at that stage. But we got up to Kibo Hut, and our porter was with us, and the new guide. At Kibo Hut, you actually slept inside. You didn't sleep in the tent. So we had dinner that night, and everybody's very exhausted. Sat around chatting to some of the other people for a while. And everybody goes to bed quite early because you have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to try to get to the top of Kilimanjaro to watch the sunrise, which is what everybody tends to do. They think that the sun rises different from the top of a mountain than it is from anywhere else. All it is really is watching the sun come up over the Serengeti, but that's the thing that you do. 4 o'clock in the morning, we're up, we're dressed, in all our makeshift gear, cannot see where we're going at all. Pitch black. All we've got is this tiny little pencil torch to lead us on the way. One of the girls that we had teamed up with, after about 200-300 meters, she just said, "It's too much, I know I'm not going to make it," and she turned back and waited for us at Kibo Hut. Yeah. Which was probably sensible. If you know you're not going to make it, why bother? The last climb to the top of Kilimanjaro it seemed like almost perpendicular. And every step you took up, you slid back too, because it's all loose gravel. So you take one step up, boom, slide back down. Another step up, slide back down. That's how it feels. You don't really know what you're doing because it's pitch black. It's literally pitch black. It was on this night anyway, because there was clouded over. There was no moon to speak of, and it was for me incredibly tough going. I couldn't understand why it was so tough for me when everybody else was actually doing it relatively easy. Later on, I sort of figured it out, that I was the only one who had a big, heavy camera bag strapped across my back, with the strap running right across my chest, blocking my breathing, and had a big Nikon camera in with a 300 zoom lens and other lenses as well. So it was actually quite heavy. And I don't know if that's what it was, or whether I was just a little weed who couldn't cope with it, but it was a really, really tough climb. We got up to the top of Kilimanjaro, to Gilman's Point. Gilman's Point. There's two summits to Kilimanjaro. One is Gilman's Point, and the other one is Uhuru. But to get to Uhuru, you have to actually descend into a little valley across, I think it was about 1 kilometre, and then go up a little bit higher up to Uhuru Point. We couldn't do it that day because it was snowing. So there was also no sunrise because we were completely snowed in. We sat there for a while theoretically the sun came up, at least things got light, but all we could see was the snowflakes in front of us. We took a couple of pictures, huddled together, tried to keep warm because it was freezing cold, freezing cold. So then we decided it wasn't going to clear, so we started back down. But it was only about 20 minutes later, 15 minutes later, when we descended through the clouds, and we were in a brilliant sunny day with clear view all across the Serengeti and the Masai Mara, and it was totally beautiful. We went back down to Kibo Hut and then decided that, well, okay, we had some breakfast and then started walking down. But the walk was so easy that it was pleasant. It was a warm day. We kept running into people, chatting with them along the way, people who were coming the opposite direction, who were making fun of us because of the assortment of different clothes that we had on. Nothing matched. And it was interesting to talk to some of them because I don't recall now exactly how much it cost us to do it the way we were doing it. But I remember we ran into a group of Englishmen who were all kitted out with their proper hiking boots and hiking canes and everything. And they were paying 5 times what we had paid because they booked the trip from England. And I'm not talking about the whole trip from England, I'm just talking about the climb from Kilimanjaro. When we compared prices, they had paid 5 times what we had paid. Instead of stopping at Horombo Camp on the way down, we got there about lunchtime, so we thought, let's just keep going. So we went all the way back down to Marungu. Spent the night in the camp again. The guide came and apologized very much for not coming. We told him that we had already paid him before we went. So we told him that we'd advised the other guide that he had the money, and he said that was fine. Both guides agreed. They knew each other, so there was no fine. They'd sort out the problems. And we spent the night there. The next day, we went back to Arusha. The idea was to then head down to Dharamsala. So I can't remember if it was that night or the following night. We caught the night bus down to Dharamsala. Not Dharamsala, Dar es Salaam. Sorry, Dar es Salaam. Dharamsala is in India. Dar es Salaam. The night bus was renowned at that time for being held up by bandits. And Fiona was quite concerned about the fact that we had a fair bit of money on us at the time. So she said to us, give me part of the money so that at least it's in 2 different places. So I gave her $1,000 American, which she decided to hide down her panties. That was okay. the bus kept breaking down. Well, it didn't actually break down. What happened was the headlights had a loose connection, and the headlights kept going. The highway between Arusha and Dar es Salaam is not really a highway. It's just a road through the savannah. So we couldn't go anywhere. There was no lights. There was very little moon. There was no lights. So every time the lights went out, the bus driver had to stop, fiddle around with the headlights, trying to get them going again, and eventually he did, until it came sunrise, till it got to sunrise. When it was sunrise, he put his foot down as hard as he could, and we pulled into this little village, still several hours from Dar es Salaam, and pulled into this little village just to stop so people could get a toilet break, pick up something to eat. So it's far easier for men to do that. We just line up along the side of the bus. The girls ran across to this toilet. After I'd finished what I was doing, I went to the local vendor, took my hat off and filled it up with samosas, just so we had something to eat on the bus. Climbed on the bus and waited. Everybody else climbed back on the bus except for Fiona. The bus started. Oh, away we go, and I'm shouting, hey, wait, my girlfriend's not here yet. So we pulled up, and the bus driver was pretty upset because we were obviously a long way behind time. Next minute, Fiona comes running across from the latrines, climbs on the bus. She's got tears running down her eyes. And I said, what's the matter? Here, have a samosa. She's crying, oh, you feed it to me, she says, you feed it. So here I am, I'm feeding this samosa to Fiona on the bus, with all these black faces looking at us, wondering, is this how white men treat white women? Do they hand feed them? Are they that pampered? But the story went like this. Fiona was so desperate to go to the toilet that she raced over to this pit latrine, where you put your feet on one side of on these wooden planks, each side of the pit latrine, pulled down the panties, and $1,000 American disappeared straight down the pit latrine. So, she said to me later that the pit latrine was almost full. So she was able to kneel down, reach into the pit latrine, and take the money back out again. But she said the worst part of it was she was so desperate to go to the toilet that she had to do that before she could reach down for the money. We got into Dar es Salaam, and we were just backpacking around, staying wherever we could. In those days, there was no flash packing like there is today, where you book everything in advance, unless you're doing it very upmarket. You just got into a town and found a place to stay. So we found a place in Dar es Salaam, which was the youth hostel. So we went to the youth hostel, which was segregated. The girls had to stay on one side and the boys on the other. That was okay, not a problem. So we met on this little coffee lounge up on the roof of the youth hostel, and we're standing there taking in the view of the street. Crowded streets, busy middle of town, and all the people standing at the bus stop. And the bus pulls in. And everybody dives onto the bus. You may have seen pictures of the pushers that they have in Japan, pushing people onto the trains. It was very much like that. There was elbows and knees going, and everybody jammed onto the bus, and they were hanging off the windows and out of the windows and everywhere. Then the bus never moved. The bus driver climbed out of the window on his side, came round to the curb, and started pulling people off the bus. So, what's going on here? It turned out he had to pull everybody who got onto the bus off the bus, so that those who were already on the bus and wanted to get out at that stop could do so. Once they got out, then everybody could get back on the bus again. It was a little bit hilarious to watch. From there we went back into Kenya, up to Mombasa, up to Nairobi and across into Uganda, which is another trip I'll talk to you about, with some very interesting things happened there. So that was our trip of climbing Mombasa. Oh, there was one thing I forgot. When we got back into Kenya, we arrived there from Mombasa. I should have said climbing Kilimanjaro. When we got back into Nairobi, the bus arrived there about 5:30 in the morning. All the locals got off the bus, and the bus driver would not let us off the bus. He closed all the doors, and he said, "No, you stay here until it gets light." And we said, "But the hotel we're only going to is only about 200 meters up the road." And we knew where it was because we'd been there before. And he said, "No, it is too dangerous. I'm not going to let you off the bus until it is light." He said, "Then it is reasonably safe. But at night time, you do not walk around Nairobi at that stage, at that time. You do not walk around Nairobi at night." So that was our story of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. A wonderful experience, tremendous experience, wonderful company all the way around. Recommend it every time. I hope you enjoyed the story. There's lots more if you'd like to follow us, so please subscribe and press the reminder bell if you want, and you'll get notification of any other stories that we post in the future. In the meantime, have a good day.